Good morning. I'm CBS 2 investigator Dorothy Tucker, joining you live from Trinity United Church of Christ on the South Side. We want to thank church leaders for opening its doors so we can have a critical conversation. We are here to talk about violence against Black women. Now, if you notice, this is not a packed room, and here's why. We know it can be painful to relive the trauma that so many women experience. We hope that you are watching from a safe space. Those who are here are committed to addressing this issue, being a part of the conversation, and providing hope for a better tomorrow. Here's what you need to know. In 2022, 1 in every 3 crime victims in Chicago was a Black woman. Let that sink in for a minute. So if there are 3 of us in the room, 1 of us is a victim. That's 30% of all crime victims in Chicago. But Black women are just 16% of the city's population. Behind each number is a face, a woman with a story, and the women you are about to see were brave enough to share their experiences.
Sierra Jameson, Naya Williams,
Tania Thomas,
Aaliyah Phillips. He was very violent. He was very mentally abusive.
I remember being in the bathroom with my, the person who assaulted me.
I was 16 when all of that was going on. And
I remember just trying to get out of the restroom because I knew that I didn't want to be there with him.
He had hit me, he punched me during an argument.
The guy took out his gun and shot 3 times inside of the window, close range.
As I was pumping my gas and he saw that I put the pump back in, he walked back up. And he just said, "Give me your keys."
He shot, boom, boom, boom.
Then I'm looking at him, I said, "Are you trying to rob me right now?"
And I end up getting shot twice in my face.
I said, "Sir, you're not getting my keys." And then he was coming at me with a knife.
So as I'm on my way to the hospital, trying to stay calm and conscious, I'm blowing out bullets from the impact. It just blew out my whole teeth.
So I backed up, I said, okay, and then I swung on him. And then he tried to jump in my Jeep.
I was an innocent person going to get something to eat, and I was preyed on.
Because I had been drugged, because I was under the influence of not only a drug, but alcohol as well. He saw an opportunity and he took it.
I saw a lot of teenagers my age going through that, fighting the person they were dating.
I just remember going to the police station the day of the arrest and, feeling extremely hopeful.
As women in my family share their stories, it was a pattern. They dated someone that abused them, or they were married to someone that abused them, and I ended up following into that when I got to high school.
And just being questioned multiple times by the representative from the state's attorney's office. She goes, "Well, nobody should touch you when you're under the influence. Nobody should touch you at all without your permission. But at this time, we're not going to file charges."
I don't know why a lot of people want to target young women. I guess because we women and they don't think that we're easy to target.
I'm extremely angry about the situation.
I thank God for being here, but it's hard to still survive something like this because most people don't survive, being shot in the face.
Most of the time, that's what I feel is just pure rage. Just thinking about it as a whole, rage keeps me up at night.
The experiences, though they've been traumatic, I now see them as strength. I now see them as lessons. I see them as a part of redemption for me.
It could have been my head, it could have been my neck, my ear, my eye. And I'm just thankful. And, I want to tell the attacker, he changed my life, but God spared mine.
I'm grateful. I went home to my son. I thank God every day that I'm here because it could have went a different way.
Sierra was strangled just a few days before her 30th birthday. In my 40-plus years as a journalist, I've never experienced a person being murdered before I could even tell their story. What happened to Sierra underscores how vulnerable Black women are and the importance of why we are here today. Now, we have gathered a panel of experts to help lead this conversation. Joining us now, Nicole Robinson, the CEO of the YWCA, Gabrielle Molden-Carwell, a trauma therapist with the group Resilience, and Geneva Brown, a professor of criminology at DePaul University. Welcome, ladies. Also expected a little bit later here today is Superintendent Larry Snelling and Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox. So, how did we get here? Why are Black women disproportionately targets of crime? Take a look at these numbers. 29% of car theft victims are Black women. 35% of assault victims are Black women. And when you look at all the victims of rape, 40% are Black women. So my first question to our panelists: who of you have been the victim of a crime?
I am a survivor. I've been assaulted at least 3 times in my lifetime, as early as my early adolescence. So,
I am so sorry to hear that.
I was robbed a number of years ago at gunpoint in Chatham. My car has been stolen and my home has been broken into, but I also come from, first of all, Dorothy, that clip is heartbreaking. And I come from a generation of women, my mother, my grandmother, who have all been victims of assault, and I carry that.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing. Gabrielle, you are a trauma therapist. What is the impact of when Black women are victims of crime? What's the impact on their psyches, on their lives?
it's heavy. It's heavy. It weighs on their ability to do day-to-day things. It weighs on their ability to form relationships. It is so much so that some people just rather not. It's overwhelming. It is, which is why I take pride in the work that I do.
And Geneva, in terms of the impact on the community, I mean, it's not just, as you say, it's the family, it's the children. Talk some more about that as well, both of you.
I'd like to jump in. I'd say that it does impact the whole community, Dorothy. If you think about structures, because part of the reason Black women are not just victims of violent crime, we are the most sexually assaulted. We have the highest number of homicides amongst women. We experience the most microaggressions at work in every single space: home, work, community, church. We are at risk. Our bodies are at risk. But then it's also complicated by racism. And you think about men and misogyny and patriarchy and policing and the over-policing of community, and how do we keep ourselves safe in an environment where we maybe don't trust institutions. There's distrust of police. There's distrust of healthcare systems. A lot of times when a survivor has to show up, there's an individual from the YWCA who's there to hold their hand. And we had an instance where a victim, a survivor of a sexual assault, showed up at a hospital, but she was paralyzed. She couldn't walk in the door. And she didn't have anyone to help her. And it was a person, an advocate from the YWCA, who showed up and walked her in. And whether it's 5 months or 5 years, we're with them on the whole journey.
I think, Dorothy, if I may, the complication is the violence that interferes with Black women living their everyday lives. So you can't go to church, you can't drop your children off, you can't go home without the fear of car theft or burglary or assault. So it is, how do Black women have the same quality of life as other women of color or white women if we are constantly looking over our shoulders? It affects the entire course of your day and of your life, and it impacts the community as well, because everyone is on guard.
And it's not like you can leave. It's not like you can get up and just move.
Well, that's the complication, because we have such a competitive housing market now, because we have so much contested area and space now. How do people will tell you, well, why don't you just go? Go where? Where can you afford to go except in the neighborhoods that you live in? And even with the exorbitant rates of rent and the increases in housing, competition for resources, you have to stay put and hope for the best.
Welcome back. I'm CBS 2 investigator Dorothy Tucker. Today we're here live at Trinity United Church of Christ to have a real conversation about the violence against black women and the need for a call to action. 1 in every 3 victims of crime is an African American woman. Here's what that really means in raw numbers. In 2022, 1,130 black women were attacked or injured on the streets of Chicago. 769 black women were victims of crime on the CTA. 277 were victimized simply going to the grocery store. 66 attacked at gas stations, and another 47 became victims at churches. One of the women I interviewed said to me at one point, "We can't seem to catch a break." Black women are looking for relief, for support, for resources, for policies that will bring about change.
Well, Malcolm X actually said that the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. And I think that that is shown throughout the data that we've seen from the last 21 years.
It really dates back to slavery.
It's longer than 20 years, right? It's 400 years of racial trauma in this country with enslaved humans.
And as a result, we were dehumanized, and what that has meant for black women over the course of decades is that we are not perceived as worthy or needing any kind of support, defense, or protection.
In the news, I've been seeing a lot of women that have filed restraining orders, but then they end up dead. They've called the police, they've done every single thing that they've been asked to do, and nothing happens, and they still lose their lives.
These narratives about black women, oh, they can take it all, right? Like they can take getting carjacked and then take care of the kids and then go to work at a low-income job and make $1 out of 15 cents, right?
When they experience harm, the family as a whole experiences harm, the community experiences harm.
I was shocked. I've been a judge, prosecutor, public defender. I never would have guessed in a million years. And I've been one in the last 20 years, but I never just picked up that this data existed.
We talked to about 100 mothers on the south side of Chicago, many of them in neighborhoods with high levels of gun violence. 56% of them reported PTSD symptoms, about 48% reported depressive symptoms.
We really need to be protecting and defending black women and their well-being and their health and their safety much more than what is happening today.
If you're experiencing depressive symptoms and not being able to go to work, then that affects your income, that could affect where you're living. So it really is a complex web of kind of consequences that happen from people being traumatized.
So what do we do? Do a policy need to be put in place? Do we have to go to Springfield? Like, what can we do as women to say, hey, enough is enough?
We need to actually center black women in the analysis and understanding of how crime impacts our communities, particularly black communities.
Look at the data, and then there has to be some advocacy. We've got to make sure that these numbers change.
When we think about what to do about it, it has to be holistic and it has to be multifaceted.
We have to look at police, prosecution, how we are perceived.
We got to remember everybody happens to be somebody's child. And we cannot forget that or lose that sight. Bring them to the table. These are the things that have to happen.
Clearly, there are no simple answers, but we have assembled a panel of voices in our community to talk about possibilities. Joining us now, Karen Freeman Wilson, President and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, Chasta Martin, Director of the North Lawndale Employment Network, and Stephanie Coleman, Alderwoman of the 16th Ward. Chasta, you are the black voice, the black man voice. Don't want to put any pressure on you. No. No, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I just want to share with the audience that one of the reasons that we connected is because I was at a gala and you came up to me, you told me you saw the story, and you said you cried. What was it when you heard the data, when you saw that? What was it that touched you? Why the reaction?
Well, first, that was shared in confidence. No. It was heartbreaking. One, I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter. I've got boys, and when you have a daughter, it just hits different. And I had came home from work. I was in the basement, and I saw the piece, and I felt like, just as a male who is serious about providing and protecting what's mine, I felt like I and men in my network have failed, at keeping our women safe. That was, I think, the biggest takeaway from that. It was really a gut punch, and I was compelled. I mean, a lot of us talk about, how to secure the village and target the element and all of the things, but when you see the data, I had never seen it like that, and so it was shocking.
So let me ask you this. Do you know any black women who've been victims of crime?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I won't share the ones that are in my family, but, a close friend of mine was actually on 87th and Dan Ryan on her way to school. This happened when she was a teen. She was 14, and she was waiting on the bus stop, and the van pulled up at that gas station right there and snatched her and sexually assaulted her. This is just a little girl on her way to school, and just the thought of that, it's unsettling, but it pisses you off, at the end of the day. So yes.
So what can black women, black men do? What do you see the role, and what can be done?
Well, I can't speak for all brothers, right? But I can tell you that it really starts in our homes. We've got to parent differently, and we've got to acknowledge that we live in a very violent society, and it is important to teach self-defense. It's also important to teach situational awareness. But I think the way that we parent our boys, we've got to make sure that they understand that under no circumstance can you put your hand on a woman. I think we've got to allow ourselves the freedom, because a lot of us are concerned about how much we make so that we can make sure that our families are not living in poverty. I mean, when I was in grad school, there was this piece of data that said that 50% of African American families spend 10 years or more of their lifetime living below the poverty line. And so if you think about all of the exposure that happens when you are living in poverty, that has a tremendous effect. So I think in the home, we just got to make sure that we're parenting our boys differently. That when we see that aggressive behavior against girls, play fighting is real popular. Some of the panelists talked about what they see in schools and where these interventions need to be. We got to check it there. When we're watching, if we're educators and we see these violent tendencies, we got to redirect it with each other on the street. I'm not asking for men who aren't competent with their hands to physically assault another male, but you do need to raise your voice and make sure that at least you're safeguarding the women that are potentially a threat, like the sister that you saw in that piece, with the Jeep.
One of the things one of the sisters said in the piece was, what can we do? Do we need to go to Springfield? Do we need to see some policies? So Karen, and to all of you, what can we do?
So first, thank you again for this, Dorothy. 20 years and here we are still. I don't think we have to change policies in Springfield. I think that there are already some policies in existence. It's illegal to assault someone. The law is there. I think that one, the enforcement of the law, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so I'm not just putting it on the police superintendent. I'm not just putting it on our state's attorney. It's not just, Superintendent Snelling or State's Attorney Fox or even Mayor Johnson or Alderwoman Coleman. It's really community having this one as an agenda item. It has to matter, right? It has to be at the top of our agenda. And then we have to think about how do we interact with the people whose jobs it is to do this every day. Where does the faith community come in? Where do sororities and fraternities and other civic and social organizations come in? We can't spend all our time just partying, right? So what are those things that we can do in cooperation with the folks whose jobs it is to make this different?
All right, so let's talk about that. The role of the church, the role of fraternities and sororities, which are very important in our community. What can they do? What do you envision?
Well, I think that, one, awareness is extremely important. And so making sure that the D9 community gets together and raises this. That we have raised other things in our community, and we have done it successfully, but doing it collectively. It can't just be the Deltas, it can't just be the AKs, it can't just be the Sigmas or the Omegas. We have to do this collectively, and we have to do it consistently. So yes, it's going in the schools, but it's also talking among ourselves as adults.
The issue here is understanding that history, believing that history, and looking at the numbers. I mean, when we look at 45% of black women are victimized, right? And we're just talking domestic violence. 51% of black women who are homicide victims, it has a domestic violence nexus to it. These are things that we have to take seriously. And if any time that I see that any of our officers have not taken this seriously, we will make sure that they're held accountable for doing that. I mean, we just recently, and I know I talk about this case a lot, it really bothers me that someone was released from prison and was able to go to a home of a woman who had had an order of protection for years, over a decade. And she was stabbed and her child was murdered as a result of it. We have to take these things seriously. I'll tell you this right now.
And I'm going to stop you, though, because I know you've probably could talk forever.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead.
Because the audience, I know, has a lot of questions.
Oh, sorry.
Kim, I feel like I want you to wrap up and add what you want to add.
Yeah, I would just say quickly, there is training and there's culture. And it's the thing that culture has to change. You know, when I came into, I was a line assistant in this office for 12 years. I was a supervisor. I saw that we were doing trainings before I got there that showed black women who were victims of murder with their private parts splayed out that we were using in trainings as though that wasn't an actual woman. I have sat and listened to people, colleagues who eventually became employees, refer to black women as baby mamas or talk about those neighborhoods. Or we had a tradition in the office where pictures of like people who had been convicted, largely black people, were set on the wall and we celebrated. And then I come in and I say, this is not how we operate. But if the culture has been such that, again, we can put the mechanics in place to hold people accountable, and we're doing that. But I think we need a full-on culture change in law enforcement. That I think what you are seeing with Superintendent Snelling is talking about, having come from these environments and these lived experiences where it's not us versus them. I tell people all the time, I'm one of them. And how we treat them is a reflection of us.
And thank both of you for your commitment today to changing the culture. Thank you. As I said, we have a room full of voices here, and we want to hear what you have to say. Up next, we will invite all of our panelists back on stage to join in a larger discussion. We'll be right back. We have heard from community leaders and officials, and now we want to hear from you. We're opening up the discussion to our invited guests in the audience who have questions for our panelists. So raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. And your name?
Reven Fellows. Question. With the National Black Agenda, National Black Club University, and we've been working on this issue when they first talked about women trafficking. We have a systematic program on trafficking and safe housing throughout the city in 300-something block club zip codes. We want to work with the alderwoman and the people that are involved in that, so we can be a part of Black by War activation. And we want to be boots on the ground. So we're doing it. We have brothers that are doing security and so forth. So the question is, can we partner with you guys with the National Block Club University, door by door, block by block?
Alderman.
Reven, absolutely, Mr. Fellows. I look forward to not only having you partner with us in Inglewood at Kennedy King College to spread the great news, but also with the Chicago Automatic Black Caucus. We are 20 members strong that represent the southwest and north side of Chicago.
Thank you. Thank you. Other question? Other question? Stand up, would you please? Your name, question?
My name's Deshaun Pope, and I wanted to ask. I've seen my mom. I'm gonna prep this question first. I've seen my mom go through it all. First, starting when I was a young boy, my mom, she really wasn't home. She was she was a single mother, and I got 4 other siblings. And my whole life, for a minute, I thought she hated us because I've never seen it at home. But recently, it was like a year ago, I've seen my mom break down in tears. And when I turned 19, she talked to me, and she told me, and she opened up to me about some things she went through. But I don't know how to handle it. And I have a younger brother, and he's been watching the same thing I've been seeing. And I want to teach him, but I don't know how. And I'm asking you right now, how can I help my family, myself, and my brother?
Gabby, Nicole, Chasna?
I would say counseling. I know that's the end all be all, but in order to be healed or start the healing process, you got to go through it. You got to process it. You got to see what that feels like. And places like Resilience offers counseling free for significant others, which would be you and your brother, and for the family. We can also treat everybody. So consider it.
Can I also respond to that real quick afterwards? I'd like to connect them with victim services, with the department, because I understand and I feel what you're saying right now. Having been through it, it sounds exactly like my story. So I would love to connect you with victim services.
And then, Dorothy, you have to talk about the mentoring that's available and being able to scale that. Many of our organizations do mentoring. We do it in schools, out of schools. But when I talk about what the Divine Nine can do, that's a prime example of providing that type of support and mentoring in the community.